Beck, welcome to Saturn Return.
Here we are, yay.
I feel like you have been one of those names in this space that we occupy that has been around for so long that I feel like I'm like always like, I need to speak to this person. And finally it's
happening,
which I'm so excited about. And you have an amazing new book, which I've been delving into, which I feel like there's quite a lot of synergy between like Saturn Returns, the kind of the journey that one goes through and the things that you talk about. But for the audience that might not be familiar with your work, would you be able to share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Definitely. Well, I think I'm a mystic, and to me, a mystic is someone who is a deep feeler, a deep thinker, and just fascinated by the sacred and the big questions of life, which I sense is most of the people listening here today. My work is really about intuition and the soul, ultimately. So it's about closing down and quietening the external noise of like what we should do, the life that we should be creating if we're being good little boys and girls and doing the right thing, versus being internally led. So it's about like saying yes to your destiny versus like, you know, just doing what you think you should do. So I think everything really comes back to that. Yeah.
And that is something I think so many people struggle with. It's like we're so conditioned to be led by the chatter or the conditioning that we completely tune out of our inner knowing, really, and our soul's purpose. And then I feel like that's often why the Saturn Returns journey is so pivotal in this stuff, because it's when people finally have that moment where they're like, I'm not living for other people anymore. I need to do what I'm supposed to do.
And I think that's really important, the way you just described that, because these, like Saturn Returns is an astrological transit that we go through. Like it's part. I like to kind of see all the things that are happening astrologically as like they're just part of our nature. Like the cosmos is part of nature, ourselves, and we're part of nature as well. And so like built into our journey are these initiatory gateways where we get to become even more of who we are. And it's easy when we've arrived there. Like I remember when I was approaching my Saturn Returns, I started having a lot of sleepless nights where I'd wake up at 3 a.m. going, oh my God, this relationship I'm in, this job, I have like dedicated myself to, this life that I've so consciously created. All of a sudden, I'm very astutely aware that it doesn't fit my soul. Now, that's not to say that it didn't before. It's just, it's not like I had everything wrong before. It's just I'm stepping into even more of who I'm becoming. I'm entering a different phase of my life. And I think that there's seasons for everything. Like in my 20s and early 30s in particular, I used to work really hard. I put all my life force into my creations, and that was like amazing. Now I'm a mum and I'm like learning how to not work so hard. And winter, you know, we're heading into winter now. I'm like, how can I rest into that season, you know, so you can be in the potency. And so I think it's really important for us to not see it as like, oh my God, I've got it all wrong, rather than how am I changing? How's life trying to initiate me right now? And I think if we resist those changes, that's when we get stuck.
Totally.
And that feeling of stuckness is information. It's good. It's just, how stubborn are we going to be? Like, oh my God. Like,
very.
Yes, exactly.
And we should. I'm like,
yes, exactly. Oh my God. Like, how much tighter can I cling to this to just check if it would really work? But there is also time and place for that. Like, I remember when I was in that moment of like, oh my gosh, the relationship, for example, is not right for me. It's not like I just gave up on it. The moment I had that first thought, I gave it my all. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I need to call it now.
So what was going on at that moment in time for you? Like building up to your Saturn return, when you started having these sleepless nights and this sort of niggling thought of this is not right, or this is not what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, I had just reached my long-term goal of becoming a creative director. I was working in advertising, so I had
career-wise peak of success.
Exactly, lots of achievement. Like I've made it. I've done all the things that I said I wanted to do, or that I was told I should do. You know, I've reached the destination, but it just doesn't feel right. So there was that. Then at the very same time as that, there were two other things happening. One is I'd been on a spiritual journey since I was 14 and had my first awakening. I'd been fascinated by the mysteries and intuition and all of that, but I'd never seen it as like a career or a path. I just saw it as like my passion. And I was in a bit of a spiritual closet. So it was like a bit of a double life thing.
But you were still practicing it, or it's still part of you?
But I got to this point where I'm like, I'm actually just as qualified in this passion as I am my career. And so there was this crossroads of like, what do I really want to do here?
Dichotomy, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And then I think, and maybe you can relate to this, where it's like the phase of being the creative director and putting myself in a way like a brand in the industry of like, this is who I am, where there was this other part of me that was really a big part of me, but I hadn't revealed it to many people. And so feeling this inauthenticity of like, I need to bring more of me into the center. And then also, like, I remember when I knew that I needed to leave my career, and I was trying to work out how to make it happen. And a big part of it, when I teach people this all the time now, was giving myself an elevator pitch, which is what I would tell people that I was going to do. So I didn't tell my, the board of directors that I was leaving to go do Akashic Records soul readings. They knew me as a copywriter, as a creative director. And so I said to them, I've always wanted to write a book. And I'm in this really unique situation where I don't have a relationship anymore. I don't have kids. And I feel like this is my moment. So I'm going to give myself 6 months to write a book. Now, that was true, but it wasn't all the truth. If I had have told them all the truth, they would have been like, what the heck,
which could have then impacted the way that you viewed what you were going to do,
because I was just becoming who I was going to be, and we're constantly in that state.
I think there's an important note on that I would just like to push, because we all know when we have a desire in us, or something in us is wanting to be awakened or come out, and then we speak it too soon. And we almost are like speaking it to someone to get validation that it can be brought to the forefront and to life. And if you speak it to the wrong person, it just suppresses it back down again, because you're like, oh no, they didn't see it. They didn't see what I see in myself. And when you're not that sure about it, it's like, just hold that sacred a little bit.
Yeah, you're so right. Because really, I used to think it was like people were just so, they would have an opinion of what I was doing. I've come to realize people don't really care so much. It's all about us individually. And so often when you say something, it might bring up fears for someone who is like, oh my God, I would love to do that, but I don't know how to do it. And, and
you don't know where it's coming from
no,
them,
exactly. But then I think also, if we are, like, I love how you described it as like a little seed. So it's like, you got to keep it precious. And I think it's really challenging, increasingly so, and in a world where like people think they know who you are, and like there's this image and opinions that people have, and then I don't know, like I feel a lot, I don't know if you do as well, like as like a public figure, people are like, oh, you're not who you said you were. And I'm like, no, I'm not that person, because that was me like 10 years ago.
People don't allow much grace for people to change and evolve. So not everybody, but that is always reflective of the person's own inability to let themselves change and grow. And we live in a world that, because of social media, you're always going to have people that are going to cast their opinions or tell you what you should or shouldn't have done with your life.
Yes.
I mean, it's
or
mad.
Accuse you of changing, and you're like, yeah.
I got something on, saw someone had written on, like, I don't know, an interview I'd done. They were like, you should have married so-and-so when you had the chance. I was like,
when you had the chance.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
But taking it back a bit, because you said when you were 14, you had your first spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Was this in Australia, and what did that look like?
It was in Australia. Two things happened like within about a month. First one was I meditated for the first time and experienced, it was just like literally it was a sports teacher did a like a free meditation class at lunchtime. Like it was very random and not like no one was meditating back then. And she introduced us to chakras, and I started feeling, now I know what that feeling was, but it kind of freaked me out a little bit because it felt like a lot of energy and kind of like a subtle shaking. I know now that is Kundalini Shakti rising, right? And whoa, around my Saturn returns, I really got to know what that was.
We're going to get into that.
But so that was something awoke within me the first time I meditated, for sure. It was subtle, but palpable at the same time. Then I had the strangest thing happen, which was like completely out of left field. I grew up in, a family that wasn't overly spiritual. I didn't learn any of that stuff. And I read this article of this mother who had just lost her daughter, who was around the same age as I was at that time. It was in one of those, magazines where you read to find out what's happening to your body and how to kiss boys, basically. And it was this article, and she was talking about losing her daughter. Her daughter had just died. And I was just completely moved by it. I started sobbing, like out of nowhere. This was not normal behavior for me, but I felt a deep connection to her and what she was talking about. I went to school. I went to Catholic girls' school, and I was sitting on the Holy Drive, we would call it, with my friend, a group of friends, but one of my friends, Jenny, and I showed her this article, and I said, the strangest thing is happening. I'm just feeling these huge feelings, and like I need to find this woman, and I just want to make it better. I just know I need to find her. And I know this sounds like really weird. And she's like, yeah, that is really weird. But then she looked up and said, that woman over there looks like her. And it was her.
What?
Yeah. And then I went to, like, it was like my body was just moved. Like, those moments where you're just like, whoa, something else is happening here. And then the deputy principal kind of intercepted me and asked me a question. And I looked around and I kind of lost her. So I was like, did I just imagine it? What happened? Then once we were done, I turned around and ran into someone. It was her. And so this is a woman called Angela Wood. And she was there talking to the senior students about, it was don't take drugs, but really it was like cherish your life and tell the people that you love, you love them, And anyway, we ended up becoming really good friends. It was an odd relationship, but it was like we just knew each other. It was her birthday that day as well, and she'd asked her daughter what her birthday present was, and she just kind of knew it was me. And I didn't understand it at the time, but now I look back and I can see, because I then would create a lot of stuff. Like I would write poetry and everything to give to her. And I think I was channeling to her.
Yeah.
And I would sit with Angela after school several times a week and just listen to her and like imagine, like see, I would sit there for hours, like just listening to her story and feeling so comfortable in her grief, which again was, there was no reason for that. Mm-hmm. She would then in school holidays take me to the different schools that she was talking to when I had different school holidays, and then she'd speak at other events. And so I would like basically go on the road with her, and she was a motivational speaker. And she took me to my first Hay House event. Hay House is my publisher. I was like, I think 15 or 16 then, and was seeing all of the speakers, and she whispered to me, that'll be you up there one day. And so she really was a big influence and initiation on my spiritual journey as well. She took me to loads of workshops, and I always got like the free child ticket. So yeah.
So she sort of initiated you into that world.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Like that meeting opened everything up for me. I then became fascinated by past lives and what happens to the soul when we pass. I'd always been a deep feeler, used words and poetry to try and like make sense of my big feelings. But this was like a complete mind awakening. And and then it's interesting because I became a mum. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And it wasn't until I had my son that my mum shared this bit of information with me about when I was born, which helped me make sense because there was quite a few mothers who had lost children who I then connected to and we developed relationships with, which I think that this was why I was in a bit of a spiritual closet, because it was so weird that those things happened, but it was so true as well. Now, further on my journey, I'm like, well, that's mediumship. That's like, you're connecting in with the energy of people who've passed. I understand it now. I didn't understand it then. But when I had my son, my mum remembered that when I was born, there's not enough beds in the hospital. There were lots of babies being born, and there must have been a full moon. And so she ended up giving birth in a hallway. That's how many babies there were. We were meant to have a private room, but it was just literally in the hallway. And then we shared a room with another mother who had just lost her child. And so as I was crying, like to be fed, it would bring her milk in and trigger her grief. And so in my first days was this kind of celebration of life and death all at once. And having, you always pick up pieces as you journey on. And I can see that's why I was so comfortable in a mother's grief. And it felt like I've had these instrumental relationships in my life who are all women who had lost their children, who I then kind of came in, and then they offered something to me and I offered something to them. And so is this something I'm so passionate about, like this blueprint of our birth. Like there's so many incredible things that it can unlock and open. And this isn't to say that if you don't have a glorious ecstatic birth, it's going to be challenging, but I know that my soul chose that. Like if you look at my astrological chart, it's like all freaking Scorpio, so yeah.
And it's also given you a gift.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then so after that, when you kind of were put on that path, but then you were very successful in the career, and during your Saturn return, sort of did everything kind of come undone?
So what made it all come undone was my best friend Blair. He was an actor. He passed away very suddenly. We had said, we met at university, we made this pact that when we become successful in our careers, we would write a book together on the spiritual path. I got the call when I was in London that he'd just entered a coma. No one expected it. It was a very rare form of leukemia, just literally happened. Got on the plane, and as I was flying to him, I felt his presence on me and I knew he had passed. And I knew in that moment, everything needed to change. I think death does this to us. Any significant loss does this to us. It's almost like it tells our brain is exhausted by the grief, and so it just kind of gives up a little bit. But this is the opportunity, because the soul, the light within us is like, right, well, what's the point if I don't truly live? And so we have these opportunities when we experience rock bottoms or loss or disappointments, where even though things feel like they're so dark or so difficult, we can actually, in that darkness, see the light even more clearly because the distractions aren't there. And so that really was a catalyst. And then literally it was just before my 30th birthday, so a couple months after that, I think it was about 3 months after that, my other really good friend, we called her Wildcat, passed as well very suddenly. And her Facebook profile is literally Blair and her together. It's the most bizarre thing. And so it was just like boom, boom. And then my 11-year relationship ended as well. And it was like my ego finally begged for mercy and let the soul step forward and to lead. I'd heard the whispers. I knew exactly the direction I was being called in.
But you just weren't quite ready.
I wasn't quite ready. And I think I needed the pressure and the crumbling of, me. It was like I was trying to hold the scaffolding up together. Mm-hmm. And then when the rug gets pulled from your life, you just can't. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of liberating as well.
To come undone.
All the things. To come undone, exactly. Yeah. It's like when your worst fears are recognized. There's something empowering about that because you're like,
I'm still here.
Well, yeah. Mm. Yeah, exactly.
And then what? So you then started doing the book?
Yeah, so I went from 5 days to 3 days in my career to work on my business.
Smart.
Yeah.
That's very smart.
And I was living in my studio in Notting Hill at the time, and oh gosh, I loved that period of my life was amazing. It was all the things because I was having this Kundalini awakening around this time.
So let's talk about that because when I was reading your book, I was really happy to read that part because I experienced a Kundalini awakening, a spontaneous one that freaked the shit out of me. Oh my God. And I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It was, I can say this because this is my podcast, but it was during a facilitated psilocybin ceremony.
Yeah, yeah.
And that then activated Kundalini awakening.
Yeah.
But for people can be like, what the hell are they talking about?
What the hell?
Because I did think that I'd gone a bit mad.
Yes. So, okay. So Kundalini Shakti. So it's not Kundalini yoga. That's the first thing people think. Oh, it's Kundalini yoga. No, Kundalini Shakti. It's the feminine pulse of life. It's the sacred energy of Earth, of the universe. And it's said that it is dormant in the base of our spine.
Like a coiled snake.
Exactly. And it seems so everyone's journey with it is individual because it's an intelligent energy that kind of knows what to do. And part of it is like surrendering to that. But it tends to present itself as this upward spiraling of energy. So from the base of the spine up, going up through the chakras up to the crown and beyond. And I've had a couple through my journey. The most significant was in that stage during my Saturn returns. I was in Notting Hill and I would wake up kind of like really like shaking, as in not shaking as in like I'm going crazy shaking, but just literally like
tremors
just,
kind of.
Yeah. And my teeth would chatter as well, like that. And I'd be like, this is the most strange thing ever. And I look back now and I think I'd heard of the phrase, but I didn't understand what it was. We were talking before when we were making a cup of tea about how we're always given the right information at the right time. And for me, for the Kundalini awakening, and maybe you were the same, I was definitely meant to have a direct experience with it rather than kind of go at it from my mind, because it's of the body. It really is of the body.
And the ego has to be completely out of the picture.
Exactly. And so I experienced that. With that came, mine was on the whole, this particular one was on the whole a positive experience in that I experienced ecstasy, really. So I was literally like, this is amazing. Like this sensual life force energy was just oozing through me. I remember going for my walks in nature up Portobello Road to Holland Park and then Hyde Park. And I began to see like almost like codes in nature, the beauty that I just hadn't seen before. So it was an incredible experience. And it was interesting as well because it happened like after the relationship. And so I was like not in a relationship with anyone, but I was like feeling this incredible sensual energy that I'd never felt before. And so, yeah, that was what it was. But I was like going to work, and I would notice like my leg kind of start to shake. I'm like, stop it.
Because you look kind of crazy.
Totally crazy.
Because it's the sort of shaking that you can't do. You can't shake that shake.
I'm trying to do it now, and it's not like shaking like that. It's subtle, and it's the energy moving through your chakras as well. And but I could control it personally. I know that's not everyone's experience. So yeah, that happened, and around the same time. It happened around, it was just after this winter. I think it was like 2011 to 2012. I don't know if you remember, it was like the world was going to end.
Yeah.
And it was literally like a all by myself Bridget Jones kind of scene where the relationship had ended. I was still just aching in grief, but feeling an excitement or a hopefulness of this new chapter I could feel beckoning me forth. So it was kind of the two together. I'm from Australia originally, and my ex had gone back to Australia, and I would normally go to Australia to be with family for Christmas, but I knew if I did that, it just wouldn't be good with that breakup. And so like, right, I'm going to hunker down in London for winter. And I had loads of friends, but this particular year, like everyone left. Yeah. And so it was like, I was literally in winter at the end of the world in my apartment. And I went somewhere for Christmas Day and stuff, and, I had a nice New Year's, but ultimately I'm there in that dark period on my own. And I hadn't really done a winter in the UK like all the way through.
That's brutal.
It's so brutal. Oh my God. Especially if you're from Australia.
Yeah.
It's so dark. But I remember I got, my mum sent me money. I went up to All Saints and I bought myself the most gorgeous like cream cashmere jumper. And that was like my little Christmas hug. And I really decided to properly descend into the winter, this period of my life, which was like a real ending and a beginning. And it was the first time I really got the medicine of the seasons, which is if you let yourself sink into that fertile void where it feels like nothing's going to grow again, oh my gosh, that's when the seeds of spring will come through. Because it seems like, and we're approaching winter here now, but in that darkness, and you're like, where are the flowers? It's all drab and dark, and you walk in the park and it feels like nothing will grow again. But in reality, beneath the surface, nothing has ever been more active. And this is what happens in these moments of our lives. So we're
the same.
Yes, we're exactly the same. And so if anyone listening is like in that period where it's like everything's been crumbling, should I let it go? What am I clinging to? Release it. And oh my gosh, am I in the darkness? Is this the end? Like, what is this? The end's also the beginning. If you fully let yourself like release and even if it's something like a friendship ending, for example, we can cling and cling and cling and run it all around in our head. But if we actually let that end properly, and then take a moment before rushing on to the next thing, we'll have more of our life force, more of our energy there with us.
We're not very good at that.
No, well, we've been raised in a society and a time that we're so disconnected from nature.
We're so out of touch with the seasons that rather than seeing them as a gift to work with and to reflect our own inner world, it's like an inconvenience because we're trying to keep up the same pace and the same momentum throughout the whole year, and it's just not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. It really isn't. And this is the thing, like we really have been programmed, and I think there is a shift happening now. Like I've seen so many books come out on wintering and how to winter, which I think is amazing. But for me, what I got programmed into me is spring, summer, spring, summer, spring, summer. If you also look at like the feminine and the archetypes of the feminine that are embraced in society, spring, which is the maiden, summer, mother, holy mother, autumn and winter, which is the wild woman, the powerful perimenopause, menopausal woman, and then the crone, the elder, is coming in, but it's their medicine that we most need right now. And so this is the shift that is so needed.
Going into that, 'cause I do want to go back to the Kundalini, but now we're on that subject, because I know that like motherhood and sort of stages of womanhood is like a big part of the work that you do. What are your thoughts in terms of the space in the world that we're moving into now with, I guess, an awakening of the feminine and appreciation perhaps of the different stages of being a woman?
Yeah. Well, I think that we are realizing, like with so much incredible work, particularly in the perimenopause, menopause area, like I feel so grateful for our generations where we actually have that information now. And there's so much talk in spiritual circles about like the new earth, for example. And I know it's just a phrase, so I'm not like, saying it's a bad phrase. But we have become so disconnected from nature that we assume that it's like the new earth, but it's not. Like the earth is going to thrive. Like the earth freaking knows how to survive.
Yeah.
Do we with her? And I think this is the real shift that we are experiencing, where you just put on the news, you open your phone, social media, you see all of the extreme things that are happening on the planet right now. And we have a news feed scrolling constantly, bombarding ourselves with these huge topics that we need to get our head around. And we realize that it's impossible to continue the way that we have been. And so, yeah, I think that we are in a period of extreme transition, extreme change, and that it is urgent for humanity to wake up to that, not get overwhelmed by it, because that just creates more trauma and more inaction. If
you think about it in the way we've been speaking, that you may have those niggles and the whispers, but then it's sort of forced upon you. Do you think that that's going to happen collectively? Because the narrative is like, we need to wake up and we need to make these changes, but are we actually going to do that in time, or is it something that you think might be more enforced?
I think that it is possible for us to adapt and react, but I think the most important thing is that we need to not get overwhelmed with it being such a huge issue, that because we become helpless in that sense. Like I see so many people in my workshops, in my peer groups as well, where it's just so easy to go into paralysis because it just feels so hopeless. Whereas if we come back to the soul, which to me is our innate intelligence, which is connected to the same intelligence that tells the flowers when to bloom, the seasons to come and go, the whole planet to spin. If we find our way back to being connected to that, Saturn Returns is part of that. It's part of our destiny arc. It's part of the blueprint of our life. If we say yes to how life is calling us to change individually, it will happen collectively. But if we get so overwhelmed at like all the things and be like, this is my responsibility, then that is really the programming of like colonial capitalist living that says that I'm separate and that I need to do this, And so I think that what is so needed is for us to come back to ourselves and to each other, and to connect in with what we're individually being called to do. I see it like we've got this, we each have a thread that we're holding for the healing of humanity. And if we just reach out and hold that thread and follow that thread, then there's something really incredible that only nature knows how to do. And we're connecting to that intelligence rather than being like, oh, I know exactly how to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I love that. And for, going back to when you were having that experience when you were going through the winter on your own here, and that was just after your Saturn return, or are you still in the midst?
I was
of
like
it?
near the end of it, but yeah, I was in it, but yeah, it wasn't right at the beginning.
And then what kind of fell into place after that for you?
Well, literally in that window, it was like between Christmas and New Year. I started my business. I also committed to writing every single day. I'd asked myself, because I knew that like my heart was aching, but it was wanting to crack open, and I was in the depths, but I also could feel life very present. So I was like, okay, I want to really step into my purpose, and I want to create a life that like lights me up. So I asked myself, what lights me up? And my answer was like quite unexpected, and I was a bit like annoyed at it, to be honest. And it was flowers, because it just felt really like trivial. Flowers, really? But I knew to trust my intuition by that stage. So I started buying myself flowers every week. I'd go to the flower market, and that's when I discovered the rose and the peony. And I would buy myself beautiful bunches each week and create these little altars around them. And I noticed that when I was surrounded by beauty, poetry came. The whispers that I so effortlessly felt when I was younger, it was just there. Then I discovered, like, being from Australia, I did not understand how incredible London parks are, and were at that stage. And I discovered Regent's Park Rose Garden, where there's literally like over 30,000 roses there. They're David Austin, which is my favorite breed of roses. They're so fragrant and gorgeous. And so I would go there every day on my way to work. And as I would walk, I knew I was stepping into, like, I was becoming someone else. I knew that I had a calling that was calling me forth, but I wasn't quite there. So I would do that walk, and imagine each step I was taking is like a step closer to who I was becoming, you know? So when I was going to work in this job that I knew wasn't in alignment anymore, I wasn't resenting it. I was just like, oh, every step I'm closer to where I'm going. And I committed to doing a meditation in the park and writing something every day. If I only had 5 minutes, that would be totally fine. I'd have to write a paragraph no matter what and post it on Instagram. So I started doing that.
I'm writing about this sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I basically just started writing to myself. So what do I need to hear today?
And then sharing it.
And sharing it. And then, because we're so connected, people who resonated felt like, oh my God, I needed to hear that today.
Yeah, and it's also so powerful that such a simple discipline that's really actionable within what you were already doing then sort of paved
this
the
is
way
the thing. And so within 6 months, I had a publishing contract. And then I'd written the book. Probably it took me another like 3 or so months of like full on writing, and I'd moved to Marylebone at that stage, and so I was even closer to the park. The park was like where I would spend all my time writing. And I remember when it was due, I had my MacBook Air and I like clicked file save on the Word document and closed my laptop and looked up and just began to cry because I realized I was in Regent's Park Rose Garden, where I'd written the entire book from park bench to park bench to park bench. And this seemingly trivial, simple thing of what lights me up and then acting on it each day had turned into this complete whole nother life for me. Wow. And that blows me away. And to me, that is an example, and we all have these examples of how that thread that we're holding, if we just follow that thread and let that intelligent, innate part of us lead us, then this tapestry that we're creating is beyond our wildest dreams. I've seen it over and over again in my life, in my students' life. We all receive guidance. I don't know anyone who doesn't receive guidance. I don't know anyone who doesn't receive creative ideas. what stops us is we're trying to figure out every single step along the way before we take our first step. We want to know the end
destination.
And that is so normal, but that's not intuitive living. Mm-hmm. That's not like, we're not in that magical, intelligent pulse if we're trying to think about every single move.
In terms of creative ideas, downloads, or being guided, where do you think those things come from?
Oh, I love this question. So I believe that there is consciousness that's wanting to be birthed into like the collective at different periods of time. It's why many artists have similar ideas and then they just express that in their own unique way. Mm-hmm. I think that intuition and creativity come from the same place.
Sorry, could you say that line again?
Yeah, no worries. I believe that intuition and creativity come from the same place. Mm-hmm. So when we are connecting in with our intuition, it's not like some of us might have different senses than others. Like some of us might have inner visions or inner hearing or whatever. They're just the body's senses. Really what we're tapping into is our inner guidance system that is connected to the intelligent pulse of life. That same thing that tells the flowers when to bloom, the planet to spin. And I believe that from a form of creativity, it's sourced from the same place. It's why right now, with everything that we're facing in the world, we need artists to open up and receive those ideas, those songs, those books, the artwork, because this is what creates new dreams, new ways forward for us. So I do think creativity and intuition come from the same place.
If someone's listening to this and they have an idea that they've been sitting on for a while, but they're sort of like, oh, I don't know, and then worried that it perhaps is coming from a place of ego or distraction, how do you think they can differentiate between whether it's, a kind of pure download that they should follow versus something that's going to take them off course or driven by their ego?
One way to do it, to know, because how do you tell the difference between your head and your heart, or your ego and your soul, for example, is voicing it out loud. So you'll probably know when you say something that feels true, you feel resonance in your body versus it just feels a bit wonky. So that's one way to do it. The other thing to pay attention to, and you can do this by talking to someone about your idea, for example, or just doing a voice note, for example, is notice how your voice changes as well. Does it constrict in your throat? Does the pitch go up? I know when I'm talking from my head, I'm like, oh yeah, and then this happened, and it's fast, it's angular, there is an ulterior motive, I'm trying to control or whatever. It doesn't mean it's bad or we're bad. We're like, the ego is a great thing as well, but knowing the difference and how it feels in your body is so important for me. And I find most people, when we're speaking from what I would call our soul or our intuition, our pace slows down. There's a cadence to it, like there's a flow to it, and it's more subtle, but there's a depth to it because there's no pushing. The soul intuition isn't trying to like make something happen. There's no like ulterior motive. It just is. So. Yeah, but I find
powerful.
The lowering of the octave, I think, is a really good one to
and also
realize.
If someone shares it with somebody that they trust,
yes,
and asks them or tells them that basically and says, "Can you please notice how let's say they have 3 different directions that they kind of think they could follow, and they're like, oh, maybe I do this, maybe I do that, and then actually sharing each one with someone, and then them saying, when you were speaking about that, you kind of got restrictive or spoke very quickly, high pitch.
Yeah.
Versus this that was a lot more expansive, because it's hard to notice when it's just ruminating in our head. That's why I guess you're saying say it out loud.
Say it out loud. Yeah, because you bring it into form, into vibration, really. Because that's really what we're putting out there when we're putting creations out there. But I know also, like, as a creative, one of the things that can lead us to paralysis is like trying to pick the right thing. And I always say, just like, put your ideas up on the wall. I use post-it notes myself, and particularly if there's like 10 different options or 3 different options, I often find, like, if I'm writing a book, for example, or what stops most people getting the book done is that they're trying to work out what the title is or which book to write first.
Or how it ends.
Oh my God. It's just like, just pick one. Just pick one and just go for it. And you'll know when you're in it if it's not right. But don't sit there in the paralysis of like spending years working out which is the right one, because I think that all that energy just kind of builds up and it just drives us insane, you know? Same thing if you don't know the book title, don't worry. Just like be like who am I writing to? And write to them, write to yourself, you know, create for yourself. Because if you create from that space, then people who have that resonance with you, because we're all connected, will feel it. Yeah.
And that's all that matters, really. And I think it's important with creative pursuits or things that we want to do in our career. I think there's always like the expectation that it needs to be this humongous success or it's not worth pursuing. But I actually disagree, because I think if you find even a small community of people that really share that resonance and value who you are authentically, that is so much more fulfilling than pursuing something that's completely out of alignment but may bring you a lot of success.
It's so true. I mean, like, I can tell, like, you are an artist in many different ways, and I think that for us creatives, it can feel like I have to just express it in a certain way, particularly if we have success. It's like, you know, we go from being the mystic, the artist, the poet, into like the machine in a way. And that's just so soul destroying, because it's like actually like so far from the essence that we created the magic with and in. And
I always think my problem is that I want to do too many different things.
I totally relate.
Share too many different stories and too many different mediums, and it's all, like that does. I worry that then there isn't like a clear through line. You know?
I know what you mean. I struggle with exactly the same thing. Yeah,
and that's when I think am I just distracting myself? But I can't help it. It's kind of the way that my mind
it is what a creative is, and I think that it does help to focus, but I don't think the focus has to be like, I'm only doing this form of expression. I think the focus is, for the next 3 months, this is my where the potency is going to go.
I really like Rick Rubin speaking about this. Obviously, he's like, oh my God.
Tell me.
He's written a book called The Creative Act, and he is a very established producer, but he's got a very unique music producer, but is very, very spiritual. And the way he speaks about all this stuff is like, do something to the best of your ability and then let it go. And like all of it's an offering to God, he says. He's like, it's not about the result or how people perceive it. It's like, do something that you feel really good about and let it out into the world. And it's just so simple, but it's so true, because it stops us getting that sort of paralysis of, but if people don't like it, and if it's not that successful, and if I don't get this opportunity from it, then I shouldn't pursue it. And you know, you don't know where that thing is gonna lead you. It might take you, like you said, that tapestry may go in a totally different, you're like, wow, I never imagined doing this, but
totally, that's so true. Yeah, and the different forms of expression can like unlock doors within us that then open other doors, like not even just opportunities. It's just, you know, it was just the pathway for something else to come in. 100%. And I remember someone once saying to me, a mentor, saying that when you birth a creation in the world, whether it's like a book or whatever, it's like offering this adult child to the world. So it's like you've gestated it and you've given birth to it, but you don't get to live with it. It's just like a formed adult who is off, leaving home, and completely independent, connected to you, but really doesn't have anything to do with you anymore.
Yeah, that's a good way of like having a little bit of separation.
Oh
with it.
God, yeah.
And in terms of motherhood as part of your journey, how much has that changed your sort of sense of identity and your work, really, or your perception of things?
Hugely. I never knew if I wanted to be a mum. I knew that I was here to create and that I had a mission in the world. So that was clear to me before I even thought about having kids. Like literally, I remember saying when I was like 5 that was the case to my mum. And so to be honest, it quite freaked me out and scared me becoming a mother, because my worst case scenario would have been to lose myself in the sense of like feeling trapped, basically. Now I'm 40.
losing your autonomy.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Now I became a mum. I was a geriatric pregnancy, then an advanced geriatric.
which, by the way,
is not that old. I got pregnant at 38, had Sunny at 39.
They can't call it that anymore. I'm sorry.
Apparently they're not meant to, but they freaking do. And it is so offensive. Seriously. It's so offensive. You're high risk just by getting pregnant, basically, which is ridiculous. But anyway, so I had Sunny and Goldie, and I had Goldie at 41, I think I was. Now, wow, like it completely changed me, but not in the way that I thought it would. I was afraid that I'd lose myself, and you do. You really do. But what I didn't realize is that there's like this third you, which is like the initiated you, that is the invitation is to say yes to that. Also, motherhood, the most physical experience of my life. I'm not even just talking pregnancy and birth, which for me, I'm a spiritual student. I love all of that. So I used it. I was like, yes, my body is knitting soul into form. Like I geeked out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see the portal, the gates of life. Like, and I did when I gave birth to my son. I connected to all my ancestors. Like it was the most, Sunny's birth was very painful and very initiatory. It was all the things you expect it to be, but it was.
And was it, where were you? Were you in Glastonbury?
I was at home. I had 2 home births in Glastonbury, where I live now. And I found some great support in order to do that, because it's quite a thing to give birth, particularly if you're in a bucket of high risk and they're saying what's true about your body. This is one of the greatest initiations that I had, was to come back to my body and work out what was actually true about me and my baby, which was in some cases different to what I was being told, because I was a number, and I get why that's helpful in some cases, but
it can also be not helpful, because it's
so much fear
again is taking you away from your innate wisdom.
Exactly. And what could go wrong, and like that you can't do this on your own, whereas women have been doing it since the beginning, and it's all it's all in balance. But anyway, motherhood, the birth was a huge initiation spiritually for me. Being a mother, oh my God, I did not expect so much of the growth that was going to happen, which was really hard as well. Like for example, like there's a thing called reparenting that I had no idea about, where basically the child at their age can, and I think it's like, I think if I had kids before I was as conscious as I am, not saying I'm the most conscious in the world, but I think the more conscious you are, maybe the more things come up because you're aware of it. This is true about life anyway, but oh my God, motherhood, definitely that. So basically this reparenting thing is that the child triggers in you the unhealed parts of you. Whoa. And so when I had my son, all these pre-verbal experiences that I had started coming up for healing. I did not expect that. The other thing.
Give me an example.
So, okay, an example was, okay, it was within the first couple of weeks postpartum. I would walk into the room, and I had my friend Binny, who is a woman in her mid-80s who teaches about birth, basically. She was there, and she would announce, "Here comes the goddess," every time I walked into the room. And I would like roll my eyes and be like, no, like my boobs are leaking. I haven't washed my hair. I got vomit on me. No, I'm not the goddess. But she kept on persisting. Here comes the goddess. Here comes the goddess. Here comes the goddess. And the amount of repetition she gave, and I really respected her as a teacher, really. And so I kind of was like, she's trying to point me towards something. And it took me that amount of times to then look at my son and basically see how he was looking at me, which was not like I was a goddess. It was like I was the goddess, like literally creator of life. And I was. My body created him. And the amount of love that he directed at me was so huge that it almost destroyed me, because it was so much. And love brings up everything that is not like it.
Yeah.
And what in that moment it did was me realize how much we put on mother, this one person, to contain all of that. And I'm like, is it even humanly possible for me to receive that amount of love? And then it made me, at a cellular level, remember me as a baby looking towards my mum like that. And was she able to receive me like that?
Because also that not being able to receive that love has nothing to do with the person that's, or baby that's trying to give it. It's to do with, you know, your, like you say, your own unhealed parts that kind of reject it because they don't feel deserving of it, or whatever it might be, or already
trauma, hurt, loss. And so we close our hearts off, and then the love comes to us, and it almost like melts that away a little bit. But what's frozen and has been melted then comes up for healing. So that was just like an example of a moment that obviously wasn't just a moment, but I was not expecting that. Yeah. I think also the thing that motherhood has taught me is like how to actually live spiritual principles. So for example, like, okay, not being attached to the outcome of things. Like I'm so attached to the outcome of the world now because I've got these kids, you know, and I realize that it's not possible to actually live that spiritual practice when you genuinely care about what's going to happen in the world, you know. Things like letting go of control. Well, my God, you've got a toddler throwing up and, you know, waking you up all through the night. I'm like an 8-hour-a-night sleeper, not anymore, you know, and so you just have to adapt to it. And the moment you think that you have it sorted with them, like, yeah, they're sleeping through the night, or yes, they're crawling and everything's childproof, they change. And so it just forces you to be in this non-permanence, like of just like, okay, I'm just going to be in the moment and react because that's all I've got to do this. And so, yeah, it's been incredible seeing all these spiritual theories that I had studied for many, many years. And I'm like, oh my God, this is actually embodying it now.
And then in terms of how it's shifted because I guess a lot of what you do is about who you are. So how did it change that at all?
My work, yeah. Definitely. There was definitely more. I'd always been connected to the feminine. Like I wrote my second book, Rise Sister Rise, which is about the rising feminine. So I'd always been in that arena, but I hadn't gone deep into mother healing the mother line, mother archetype. So that definitely came in a really big way. The other thing that came in really strongly was ancestral and collective healing, because my experience of literally giving birth, I connected to ancestors. I connected to in one of my births, it was like the energy, like the grief and the rage, but the love and the strength of like all women who've ever done that. And so there was this connection that happened, which then is definitely more deeply in my work, particularly the ancestral healing piece. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And inner child stuff too. Oh my gosh. I've got some friends who have teenagers, and because I was like, just need to get through these early years, and they're like, oh, the teenage years, the teenage years. But Caggie, like when I became a mum, it was also COVID. It was also, I was in my, like, there's other astrological transits, which are a little bit further on from 36 to 42, which are like the midlife crisis ones.
Yeah.
So I like chose a pretty intense time to be a mum.
But also I feel like that's quite fitting because that is like a Saturn, I think, in opposition where you kind of like an up leveling.
Totally. Yeah, there's Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. Pluto's the harshest.
Everyone thinks it's Saturn.
Oh my God.
Pluto's a motherfucker.
Pluto is literally the underworld. Pluto, I think it was like forbidden to actually say the planet Pluto because it meant hell. But it takes you into the descent. And so basically you are, your feet are held to the fire, but you're made in that fire too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, maybe that's the next book.
Maybe, we'll see. But for those that want to kind of find more about you, where is the best place for them to do that? And also, do you have any, I know it's kind of hard sometimes, but like final things to share, because a lot of our audience are women that are going through transitions in terms of purpose and career, perhaps thinking about motherhood. So I feel like a lot of what we've discussed is very, very important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, the best place to I guess go deeper with me is my book, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. It's like in all the places, and you know, I'm on social media and my website and all of that. So you can check all of that out. I do oracle cards as well if you fancy. That's kind of a good gateway. Yeah. But in the sense of like, yeah, final word, final message, I would just say like to really don't let the things that you're afraid of or that are like a contraction to you shut you down. Like so often those things that we are afraid of are actually where the medicine is for us. And so, yeah, for example, if you're afraid of motherhood, lean into that. Like there's information there. It doesn't mean that you have to go there and do it, but that there's a jewel in there for you. And yeah, I would just say anyone who has, like, we're all intuitive. We all have something that we're being called towards constantly, and try not to get overwhelmed with all the things, and just, I call it, take a baby step. So what's your soul calling you to do today? And what's a baby step you can take that would literally take 1 minute, 2 minutes? No. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show.